Caleb Turner stood in the parking lot of Riverside Cafe, his truck door half open, every instinct screaming at him to leave. This was a setup. A joke his buddies had orchestrated over beers and laughter, betting he'd never show. But here he was, a 34-year-old single father who'd sworn off vulnerability, about to walk into what could be the most humiliating night of his life. He didn't know yet that the woman waiting inside would unravel everything he thought he knew about safety, love, and second chances. If you want to see how a prank blind date became the most important night of one man's life, stay with me until the end. And if this story touches you, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this journey travels. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine and lake water as Caleb finally forced himself to move. His boots crunched against the gravel, each step feeling heavier than the last. Through the cafe's windows, he could see warm light spilling across wooden tables, couples leaning toward each other in conversation, the whole scene looking like something from a life that wasn't his anymore. He'd spent the last 5 years building a different kind of existence, one that revolved around his 8-year-old son, Mason, one that meant early mornings on construction sites, sawdust under his fingernails, and evenings helping with homework at their small cabin's kitchen table. Romance, or whatever people called it these days, had no place in that carefully constructed world. The divorce had taught him that much. Caleb paused at the cafe entrance, his reflection staring back at him in the glass door. Dark hair that needed cutting, a face that had seen too many early mornings, flannel shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked by the honest work of a carpenter's trade. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd learned to find peace in solitude. "You actually came." The voice came from behind him. Caleb turned to find Danny Reeves, one of the friends responsible for this disaster, leaning against a lamppost with a grin that was equal parts surprise and amusement. "Don't look so shocked," Caleb said, his voice carrying that rough edge it always had after a long day. "You're the one who wouldn't shut up about it for 3 weeks. Man, we honestly thought you'd bail." Danny pushed off the lamppost, hands in his pockets. "The bet was 50-50. "There's a bet?" "There's always a bet." Danny's grin widened. "Look, I know we gave you hell about this, but honestly, Sarah, that's who set this up. She says this woman is actually cool, real, not some—" "Danny," Caleb's jaw tightened. "Is this a real date, or is this you guys trying to mess with me?" Something shifted in Danny's expression. The joking fell away, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. "Started as a joke, if I'm honest. You've been alone so long, we thought— hell, I don't know what we thought. That maybe you needed a push, but Sarah swears this woman is solid, says you two might actually hit it off." Caleb felt his stomach turn. "So I'm walking in there, and she thinks this is legitimate?" "She knows it was a setup. Sarah told her the whole story, said you're a good guy who hasn't dated since your divorce, and that we're idiots, but we mean well." Danny shrugged. "She still agreed to meet you. That's got to count for something." Before Caleb could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Mason, sent from Caleb's mom's house where he was spending the night. "Dad, don't be nervous. Grandma says you look handsome. Love you." The message hit him harder than it should have. His kid, 8 years old, already trying to take care of his father's feelings. Caleb had worked so hard to build stability for Mason after the chaos of the divorce, to create a home where his son never had to worry about adult problems. And here he was, nervous about a date like some teenager. "You good?" Danny asked. Caleb pocketed his phone. "Yeah, I'm good. Want me to come in with you? I could—" "Go home, Danny." But Caleb said it with something close to affection. These were his friends, idiots though they were. They pushed because they cared, even when they had no idea what they were doing. Danny clapped him on the shoulder. "Her name's Nora. She's at the corner table by the window. And Caleb? Try to smile at least once. You've got that whole brooding carpenter thing down, but it might scare her off." Then Danny was gone, disappearing into the parking lot and leaving Caleb alone with his decision. Through the window, Caleb could see the corner table. A woman sat there, her back partially to him, dark hair falling past her shoulders. She was looking out at the lake, her profile calm and unreadable. Something about her stillness caught his attention, the way she seemed comfortable in her own space, not checking her phone every few seconds or fidgeting with nervous energy. Caleb took a breath and pushed through the door. The cafe's warmth enveloped him immediately. Acoustic guitar played softly from overhead speakers, and the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. A few heads turned as he entered, the hazard of living in a small town where everyone knew everyone. But he kept his eyes on that corner table. The woman turned as he approached, and Caleb felt something unexpected. Relief. She wasn't trying too hard, no dramatic makeup or calculated outfit. She wore a simple gray sweater, minimal jewelry, and her brown eyes held an expression he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror most mornings, a guardedness born from experience. "Caleb?" she asked, her voice lower than he'd expected, warm but careful. "That's me." He stood awkwardly at the table's edge, suddenly aware he'd forgotten every social grace he'd ever known. "You're Nora?" "I am." A small smile touched her lips. "Sarah warned me you might try to escape through the bathroom window." Despite himself, Caleb laughed, a short, genuine sound that surprised them both. "Thought about it, but I'm on the second floor of this building in my mind, and the drop looked bad." "Smart man. Risk assessment." Nora gestured to the chair across from her. "Want to sit, or should we both cut our losses and admit this is weird?" Caleb sat, grateful for her honesty. "It's definitely weird." "Sarah told me the whole story," Nora continued, wrapping her hands around a coffee mug that looked like it had been refilled several times. "About your friend setting this up, about the bet, all of it. I almost canceled." "Why didn't you?" She considered the question, her gaze drifting briefly to the window before returning to him. "Because I figured anyone who'd actually show up to a blind date his friend set up as a joke is either desperate or brave. And Sarah promised me you weren't desperate." "Just brave, then? Or stubborn?" Nora's smile widened slightly. "I haven't decided yet." A waitress appeared at their table, young, college-aged, someone Caleb recognized from the hardware store where he bought supplies. She took their order with a knowing grin that suggested the small-town gossip mill would be well fed by tomorrow morning. Caleb ordered coffee and whatever sandwich they had ready. Nora did the same. When they were alone again, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Caleb searched for something to say, some way to bridge the gap between strangers forced together by well-meaning friends. But every opening line felt rehearsed or fake. It was Nora who broke the quiet. "Sarah said you're a carpenter, that you have a son." "Mason, he's 8. Caleb relaxed slightly, grateful for solid ground. "Yeah, I do custom woodwork mostly. Cabinets, furniture, restoration projects. Whatever pays the bills." "Do you like it?" The question surprised him. Not, "How long have you been doing it?" or "Where did you learn?" but whether he actually liked it. "I do. There's something about working with wood that makes sense to me. You can see what you're building. If something's wrong, you can fix it. It's honest work." Nora nodded slowly. "I get that. I work in medical records at County Hospital. It's not exciting, but it's steady. And after my divorce, steady felt important." The word hung between them, divorce. They'd both said it now, acknowledged the thing that probably brought them to this table. The shared understanding of what it meant to have your life split in two. "How long ago?" Caleb asked. 3 years? You?" 5. "Does it get easier?" Caleb considered lying, offering the kind of platitude people expected. But something about Nora's directness made him want to match it. "Some days yes, some days no. I don't miss the marriage. But I miss believing in things, I guess. The idea that you can build something with someone and trust it won't fall apart." Nora's expression shifted, a shadow of recognition passing across her features. "Yeah, I know that feeling." Their coffee arrived, providing a natural pause. Caleb added cream and sugar, more than he usually took, just to have something to do with his hands. Across from him, Nora drank hers black, staring into the mug like it held answers. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure." "Why did you actually show up tonight? And don't say because your friends wouldn't leave you alone. I want the real reason." Caleb set down his coffee. The question deserved honesty. "My son texted me before I came in, told me not to be nervous. And I realized I'd become this person who's so focused on being stable and safe for him that I'd stopped, I don't know, trying, risking anything." He met her eyes. "I came because being here scared me. and I thought maybe that meant I should do it. Nora didn't respond immediately. She studied him with an intensity that felt like she was reading between his words, looking for the truth beneath the surface. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. My mother lives with me. She has early-stage dementia. Most nights I come home from work and help her remember what day it is, what she ate for breakfast, whether she took her medication. Nora's fingers tightened around her mug. Sarah's been trying to get me to date for over a year. I always said no because who wants to deal with all that? A divorced woman in her 30s with a sick mother and a whole lot of baggage? Is that a serious question? What? Because from where I'm sitting, you sound like someone who shows up, someone responsible. That's not baggage. That's character. Nora blinked, and for a moment Caleb saw something vulnerable flash across her face before she collected herself. You don't know me. No, but I know what it's like to organize your whole life around someone else's needs, to worry that you're not enough, that you're too much, that nobody's going to want the complicated version of you. Caleb leaned forward slightly. So yeah, I don't know you, but I recognize you. The conversation shifted after that. The careful guard they'd both been maintaining started to lower, degree by degree. Nora told him about her work at the hospital, about the strange intimacy of handling people's medical histories, bearing witness to their lives through paperwork and files. Caleb talked about his recent project, restoring an antique desk for the town library, and how satisfying it was to bring something broken back to beauty. Their sandwiches arrived, and they ate slowly, the meal becoming secondary to the conversation. Nora asked about Mason, and Caleb found himself sharing stories. The time his son decided to build a birdhouse entirely by himself and ended up creating something that looked more like modern art. The way Mason would sit on the workshop floor doing homework while Caleb worked, both of them comfortable in shared silence. You really love being a dad, Nora observed. Best thing that came from my marriage. Only good thing, honestly. Caleb pushed his plate aside. When everything fell apart, Mason was the reason I kept going. Still is. What happened? With your marriage, I mean. If you don't mind talking about it. Caleb minded, but he also found himself wanting to tell her. We got married young. I thought I was supposed to, hit all those milestones. Marriage, house, kids. We had Mason, and for a while things were okay. But my ex-wife, Jenna, she wanted a different life, more excitement, more spontaneity. She felt trapped by routine. He paused, old familiar pain surfacing. She cheated, got involved with someone she worked with. When I found out, she didn't even try to hide it, said she'd felt dead inside for years. That's awful. The worst part was wondering if she was right, if I'd somehow killed that part of her by being too steady, too boring, too much like this. He gestured at himself. That's not on you, Nora said firmly. She made a choice. She could have talked to you, could have tried to work on things. She didn't. That's her failure, not yours. The conviction in her voice surprised him. You sound pretty sure about that. I am, because my ex-husband did the same thing, made me feel like his unhappiness was my fault, like I wasn't exciting enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't enough, period. Nora's jaw tightened. Took me 2 years of therapy to understand that his emptiness wasn't something I could fill. Some people are just hollow. They keep looking for external things to make them feel alive, never realizing the problem is internal. Is that what happened with your divorce? Partially. David, my ex, he had this idea of who I should be. More social, more outgoing, more interested in his career and his friends and his goals. When I didn't transform into that person, he got mean, little criticisms that added up, making me feel small. She looked directly at Caleb. I stayed too long because I kept thinking if I just tried harder, I could be what he needed. By the time I left, I barely recognized myself. Caleb felt anger rise in his chest, not at Nora, but at the man who'd made her feel that way. You're better off without him. I know that now, but it took time to believe it. Nora glanced at her watch and seemed surprised. We've been here almost 2 hours. Is that bad? No, it's just unexpected. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I thought this would be awkward and painful, a favor to Sarah that I'd endure and then forget about. And I'm still here. So are you. The cafe had emptied considerably. The waitress was wiping down tables, shooting them occasional glances that suggested closing time was approaching. Outside the window, full darkness had settled over the lake, turning it into a mirror for the moon. "Want to walk?" Caleb asked, surprising himself. "There's a path along the water." Nora considered, then nodded. "Okay." They paid, splitting the check despite Caleb's half-hearted protest, and stepped out into the cool night. The temperature had dropped, and Nora hugged her arms around herself. Without thinking, Caleb shrugged off his jacket and offered it to her. "I'm fine," she said. "You're shivering." "I'm always cold. It's a circulation thing." "Nora, take the jacket." She looked at him for a long moment, some internal debate playing out behind her eyes. Then she took it, slipping it over her shoulders. It hung large on her frame, and something about seeing her in his jacket made Caleb's chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. They walked in silence for a while, following the paved path that wound along the lake's edge. Water lapped gently against the shore, and somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called out. The town lights reflected on the lake's surface, creating a second world beneath the first. "Can I tell you something?" Nora asked. "Yeah." "When Sarah first told me about you, about this whole setup, I looked you up online, found your business page, saw some of your work." She glanced at him sideways. "You're really talented. Those pieces you make, they're beautiful." "Thank you." Caleb felt heat rise to his face, grateful for the darkness. "I didn't know I had a presence worth stalking." "It wasn't stalking. It was research." Nora's tone was teasing. "And I noticed something. Every single testimonial on your page mentioned how patient you were, how you listened to what they wanted and somehow made it better than they'd imagined." "That's the job." "Maybe, but I think it says something about who you are. You pay attention. You care about getting things right." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "That's rare." They stood there on the path, close enough that Caleb could see the moonlight reflected in her eyes. The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility. He became acutely aware of how little space separated them, how easy it would be to close that distance. But he didn't, because moving too fast was how things broke. And whatever this was, this unexpected connection with a woman he'd met through a joke-blind date, it felt too important to rush. "I should probably get home," Nora said softly, though she didn't move. "My mother's with a neighbor, but I don't like to be gone too long." "I understand." They walked back to the parking lot slowly, as if neither of them wanted the evening to end. When they reached Nora's car, an older Honda that had seen better days, they faced each other again. "This was nice," Nora said. "Really nice. I wasn't expecting that." "Neither was I." Caleb hesitated, then asked the question that had been building all evening. "Can I see you again?" Nora pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders. "I want to say yes. But I need to be honest with you. My life is complicated right now. Between my mother and work and just everything. I don't have a lot of space for someone new, and I don't want to start something I can't follow through on. What if we take it slow?" Caleb heard himself saying. "No pressure, just coffee sometime or another walk, whatever works. You'd be okay with that? With slow and complicated?" "Nora, I'm a single dad who works 60-hour weeks and hasn't dated in 5 years. Slow and complicated is basically my comfort zone." She laughed, a real, genuine laugh that lit up her whole face. "Okay, yeah, let's try that." They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with phones in the cold. When Nora went to remove his jacket, Caleb stopped her. "Keep it. Give it back next time." "Next time," she repeated, like she was testing the words. "I like the sound of that." Nora got in her car, started the engine, then rolled down the window. "Hey, Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank your friends for being idiots. Turns out they might have accidentally done something right." Then she was gone, taillights disappearing into the night, leaving Caleb standing alone in the parking lot with a strange feeling spreading through his chest. It took him a moment to recognize what it was. Hope. He got in his truck and sat there for a while, not ready to drive yet. His phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Well? Did she show? How bad was it?" Caleb smiled and typed back, "She showed. It wasn't bad." 3 dots appeared immediately, Danny typing a response, but Caleb pocketed his phone before it could come through. He wasn't ready to share this yet, to let his friends' jokes and commentary color what had happened. This thing with Nora, whatever it was or might become, it felt like something that needed protecting. The drive home took 15 minutes through dark country roads. His cabin sat on 3 acres of wooded property, far enough from town to feel private, but close enough for Mason's school commute. Caleb had bought it right after the divorce, a fixer-upper that he'd slowly been restoring, room by room. It was small but solid, the kind of place that felt like an extension of himself. Inside, the silence greeted him like an old friend. He moved through the familiar space, kitchen, living room, the workshop he'd built onto the back. His hands found the piece he'd been working on, a jewelry box commissioned for someone's anniversary, the wood smooth under his fingers. He thought about Nora's question. Did it get easier? The truth was more complicated than what he'd told her. The divorce had broken something in him, some fundamental trust in his own judgment. If he couldn't make his marriage work, if he'd failed to see his wife's unhappiness until it was too late, what else was he blind to? So he'd rebuilt his life around certainty, work he could trust, a son he loved, routines that didn't require faith in anyone but himself. And now here was Nora Hayes, walking into his carefully constructed world with her honest eyes and complicated life, making him feel things he'd thought he'd buried for good. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his mother. Mason wants to know if you had fun on your date. I told him to mind his business, but you know your son. Caleb smiled and called instead of texting. His mother answered on the second ring. Well? Linda Turner's voice carried that mix of curiosity and concern only mothers could manage. How was it? It was good, Mom. Really good. Good enough to see her again? Yeah, we're going to take it slow, but yeah. His mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Caleb, honey, I'm glad. You've been alone too long. And before you start with the whole "I have Mason and that's enough" speech, I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. You always do. But baby, being a good father and having someone for yourself aren't mutually exclusive. You deserve both. I know, Mom. Do you? Because you've been punishing yourself for that marriage ending for 5 years now. At some point, you have to let yourself be happy again. The words hit harder than Caleb expected. I'm not punishing myself. You're not rewarding yourself either. You work, you take care of Mason, you fix things. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Tonight, Caleb thought. Tonight he'd done something just because he wanted to, even though it scared him. Can I talk to Mason? He asked, changing the subject. His mother sighed, but let it go. He's asleep. Was out like a light by 8:30. That boy played so hard today he could barely keep his eyes open through dinner. Thanks for watching him, Mom. Any time, you know that. We'll bring him home in the morning after breakfast. And Caleb? I mean what I said. Don't be so afraid of wanting something that you forget how. After they hung up, Caleb stood in his quiet workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the evidence of his careful, controlled life. His mother was right. He had been afraid. Afraid of wanting too much, of trusting too quickly, of opening himself up to the kind of pain he'd worked so hard to move past. But tonight, sitting across from Nora in that cafe, he'd felt something shift. Like a door he'd nailed shut had cracked open just enough to let light through. He thought about the way she'd looked at the lake, comfortable in silence. The way she'd challenged him with her honesty, not letting him hide behind easy answers. The way his jacket had looked on her shoulders, and how she'd smiled when she said, "Next time." Caleb picked up a piece of sandpaper and returned to the jewelry box, letting the familiar rhythm of work steady his thoughts. The wood grain emerged slowly under his hands, pattern and beauty that had been there all along, just waiting to be revealed. Maybe that's what was happening with Nora. Maybe they were both pieces of wood that had been sanded down by life, left rough and unfinished. But together, they might find a way to help each other become something whole again. Or maybe he was getting way ahead of himself over one good coffee date. But as Caleb worked through the night, his hands busy and his mind wandering, he couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had changed something fundamental. The joke blind date his friends had set up, the thing that was supposed to be humiliating or forgettable, had instead become the first real step he'd taken toward letting someone in. And the scary part wasn't that it might not work out. The scary part was that it might. 3 days passed before Caleb heard from Nora again. 3 days during which he caught himself checking his phone more often than he wanted to admit, wondering if he'd misread the connection between them, if maybe she'd changed her mind in the cold light of day. Mason noticed his distraction almost immediately. "Dad, you messed up the measurements," his son said Thursday evening, pointing at the cabinet door Caleb had just cut. "That's supposed to be 18 inches. That's like 20. Caleb looked down at the wood in his hands and cursed under his breath. Mason was right. He'd been so lost in thought he'd completely botched the cut. "Good catch, bud. This is why I keep you around." "Are you okay?" Mason tilted his head, studying his father with those observant eyes that sometimes seemed too old for an 8-year-old. "You've been weird since your date." "I haven't been weird." "Dad, you put orange juice in your coffee yesterday." Caleb couldn't help but laugh. "Fair point. I guess I've got some things on my mind." "Is it the lady? Nora? How do you know her name?" "Grandma told me." Mason picked up a piece of scrap wood, running his fingers along the grain the way he'd seen his father do 1,000 times. "She said Nora's nice, is she?" Caleb set down his tools and gave his son his full attention. "Yeah, she is, really nice. But I only met her once, so we're still getting to know each other." "Do you like her?" The question was simple, direct, exactly the kind Mason always asked. No games, no dancing around the subject. It was one of the things Caleb loved most about his son. His honesty, his straightforward way of seeing the world. "I do like her. Is that okay with you?" Mason shrugged, but Caleb could see him processing the information. "I guess. Are you going to get married?" "Whoa, slow down there. We had coffee, one time. Marriage is a pretty big jump. But if you like her..." "Mason, here's the thing about grown-up relationships. They're complicated. They take time. And even when two people like each other, that doesn't mean they'll end up together." Caleb pulled his son closer. "But I promise you this. Nothing changes with us. You're still my priority. You're still the most important person in my life. That doesn't shift just because I went on a date." Mason leaned against his father's shoulder, quiet for a moment. "Mom has a boyfriend now. Did you know that?" The statement landed like a punch. Caleb kept his voice steady. "No, I didn't know that. Did she tell you?" "Last weekend when I stayed with her. He was there. His name's Brad and he talks really loud and he kept trying to get me to like sports." Mason made a face. "I told him I like building things better." Caleb felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger that Jenna had introduced Mason to someone without discussing it first, protectiveness toward his son, and something else he didn't want to examine too closely. "How do you feel about that?" "It's weird. But Mom seems happier, I guess." Mason looked up at his father. "Is that bad? That I think it's okay if she's happy?" "No, bud. That's not bad at all. That's big of you, actually." Caleb pulled his son into a proper hug. "Your mom and I didn't work out, but that doesn't mean I want her to be miserable. And it definitely doesn't mean you can't care about her happiness. So if you found someone who makes you happy, that would be okay too?" "Theoretically, yes." "What's theoretically mean?" "It means in theory, like as an idea. But ideas and real life are different things." Mason pulled back, giving his father a look that was pure skepticism. "You use a lot of big words when you're avoiding stuff. When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't pay attention sometimes." Caleb's phone buzzed on the workbench, and both of them looked at it. Nora's name appeared on the screen with a message. "Hey, sorry for the radio silence. Had a rough couple of days with my mom. Still interested in that slow and complicated thing we talked about?" Mason read the message upside down before Caleb could grab the phone. "That's her, isn't it? You should answer. Don't play it cool. Girls hate that." "Where are you learning this stuff?" "YouTube." Mason grinned. "Answer her, Dad." Caleb typed back. Definitely still interested. "Everything okay?" The reply came quickly. "Define okay. But I could use a friend right now if you're free." "She needs you," Mason said, reading over his shoulder again. "You should go." "I can't just leave you here alone." "Call Grandma. She'll come over." Mason was already heading for the house phone. "This is important, Dad. Trust me." 20 minutes later, Linda Turner arrived with a knowing smile and a casserole she'd apparently had ready to go. "You look nervous," she observed, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "I'm not nervous." "You're wearing two different boots." Caleb looked down. She was right. One brown, one black. "I was working." "Uh-huh." His mother kissed his cheek. "Go. Mason and I will be fine, and Caleb, don't overthink this. Just be yourself." Nora had suggested meeting at the park near the hospital where she worked. It was after 8, fully dark, and the park was nearly empty except for a few die-hard joggers finishing their evening routes. Caleb found her sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond, still wearing her work scrubs, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and even in the dim park lighting, he could see the exhaustion in her face. "You came. You asked." He sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Bad day?" "Bad few days." Nora let out a long breath. "My mom had an episode Tuesday night. Got confused, thought she was back in her childhood home. Started packing bags, insisting she needed to get back for dinner, or her father would be angry. It took me 2 hours to calm her down, to help her remember where she really was. I'm sorry." The worst part is watching her come back to herself and seeing the fear in her eyes. She knows what's happening to her, knows she's losing pieces of herself. And there's nothing I can do except hold her hand and lie and tell her it's going to be okay. Nora's voice cracked slightly. "I'm so tired of lying." Caleb didn't offer platitudes or try to fix it. He just moved closer, closing the distance between them, and sat in the silence with her. Sometimes that was all you could do, show up and be present in the hard moments. "I almost didn't text you," Nora admitted. "Thought about just letting this fade away before it started. Because who wants to sign up for this? For late-night emergencies and complicated family dynamics, and a woman who's already stretched too thin?" "I do," Caleb said simply. She turned to look at him. "You don't know what you're saying." "Maybe not completely, but I know what it's like to have your life wrapped around someone else's needs, to feel like you're drowning in responsibility. And I know what it means when someone asks for help instead of pretending everything's fine." He met her eyes. "You didn't have to text me, but you did. That takes trust. Or desperation. Or both. Both is okay." Nora laughed, a watery sound that held more exhaustion than humor. "You're very calm about all this. One of us should be." They sat together as the night deepened around them. Caleb told her about Mason's reaction to learning about the date, about his son's surprising wisdom and his concerns about change. Nora shared more about her mother, about the woman she'd been before the disease, sharp and independent and fiercely loving. About how hard it was to watch that person slowly disappear while her physical body remained. "Do you have help?" Caleb asked. "Or is it all on you?" "I have a daytime aide who comes in while I'm at work, but nights and weekends are mine. My sister lives in Colorado, sends money when she can, but can't handle being around Mom like this. Says it's too painful." Bitterness crept into Nora's voice. "Must be nice to have that option." "That's not fair to you." "Life isn't fair. I figured that out a while ago." A jogger passed by, earbuds in, oblivious to their conversation. The pond reflected the park lights, creating ripples of illumination across the dark water. Caleb found himself wanting to reach for Nora's hand, but held back, uncertain if the gesture would be welcome. "Can I ask you something?" Nora said. "Anything." "Why did you really answer my text? You could have made an excuse, backed away from the complicated mess I just dumped on you. Why didn't you?" Caleb considered the question carefully. "Because when my marriage was falling apart, when I was sitting in a lawyer's office trying to figure out custody arrangements and feeling like my entire world was ending, everyone had advice. Everyone had opinions. But what I needed was someone to just sit with me in it, to not try to fix it or minimize it, but to acknowledge that it was hard and it hurt, and it was okay to not be okay." He looked at her. "You gave me honesty at that cafe. The least I can do is give you presence now." Nora's eyes glistened in the low light. "I'm not usually this much of a disaster." "You're not a disaster. You're someone dealing with a difficult situation as best you can." "You always this nice?" Only to people I like. She smiled then, a real smile that pushed back some of the exhaustion. I like you too, Caleb Turner, even though this is probably a terrible idea. The best things usually are. They stayed at the park for another hour, talking about smaller things now. Nora asked about his work, and he described the satisfaction of restoration, taking something damaged and bringing it back to function and beauty. She told him about the strange world of medical records, about being the keeper of people's stories told through test results and doctor's notes. Do you ever want to do something else? Caleb asked. Sometimes. I used to want to be a nurse, actually. Started school for it and everything. But then my dad got sick and I needed to work full-time, and nursing school didn't fit the schedule. So I took the records job because it paid better and had good benefits. Nora shrugged. That was 12 years ago. Now it's just what I do. It's not too late, to go back to school. With my mom the way she is, with bills and responsibilities and everything else. She shook her head. That ship has sailed. Maybe, or maybe you're just waiting for the right time. Spoken like someone with options. The comment stung, though Caleb knew she didn't mean it that way. I get it, believe me. When Jenna left, I had to rebuild everything from scratch. Figure out how to be a single parent, keep the business running, make sure Mason didn't fall apart in the middle of it all. There were plenty of things I wanted to do that I couldn't because life demanded something else. Like what? I always wanted to teach. Woodworking classes, maybe at the community college, pass on the skills, work with students, but the schedule doesn't fit with Mason's needs, and the pay wouldn't cover what I make doing custom work. He smiled ruefully. So yeah, I get it. Dreams versus reality. Nora was quiet for a moment. You'd be a good teacher. You have the patience for it. How would you know? You've met me twice. Some things you can tell about people right away. The way you talk about your work, about Mason. You don't just do things, you care about them. That's teaching. She stood, stretching. I should get home. The aide leaves at 9, and I don't like Mom to be alone too long in the evenings. That's when she gets most confused. Caleb stood as well. Can I walk you to your car? It's right there. She pointed to the Honda parked under a nearby streetlight. I know, but I'd like to anyway. They crossed the parking lot slowly, neither of them in a rush. At her car, Nora turned to face him, and Caleb was struck again by how tired she looked, how much she was carrying. Thank you, she said. For showing up, for listening, for not running away screaming. I don't scare that easy. We'll see. She dug her keys from her purse, then hesitated. Would you want to have dinner sometime? Actually have a meal instead of just coffee and emotional dumping? I'd love that. Fair warning, it'll have to be at my place. I can't leave Mom with just anyone, and hiring a sitter for a whole evening gets expensive. So it would be me cooking, probably something simple, with my mother potentially wandering in and asking who you are multiple times. Nora grimaced. I know that's not exactly romantic. Nora? Caleb waited until she met his eyes. I have an 8-year-old who will definitely interrupt us to show me whatever YouTube video he's obsessed with that week. Romance is overrated. Real life is better. You say that now? I mean it. Text me when works for you, and I'll be there. She searched his face, looking for something. Doubt, maybe, or insincerity. Whatever she was looking for, she must not have found it because her expression softened. Okay, this weekend? Saturday? Saturday works. Nora got in her car, but didn't immediately start it. Through the open window, she said, Your jacket's in my back seat. The one you lent me. Want it back? Keep it a while longer. Gives you a reason to see me again. Pretty sure I already have that reason. Then keep it because it looks better on you. She laughed, shaking her head, but he could see the pleasure in her expression. Smooth, Mr. Turner. I have my moments. Caleb watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the night, and felt that same unexpected hope rising in his chest. This thing between them was messy and complicated and probably impractical. But it was also real, more real than anything he'd felt in years. His phone rang as he walked to his truck. Danny's name flashed on the screen. So? Danny said instead of hello. You seen her again, or what? How do you even know I saw her tonight? Sarah told me. Nora texted her. Said you showed up when she was having a rough time. Caleb climbed into his truck. Yeah, I saw her. We're having dinner Saturday. At a restaurant? Her place. Danny whistled low. Meeting the family already? That's serious. It's not like that. She has responsibilities. Can't just go out whenever. So we're working around it. Man, you really like her, don't you? Caleb started the engine, letting it warm up. Yeah, Danny, I really do. Good. It's about damn time. His friend's voice turned serious. You deserve this, you know. After everything with Jenna, after doing the single dad thing alone for so long, you deserve someone good. Thanks, man. Just don't screw it up. Helpful advice. I'm serious. You've got this tendency to overthink everything, to find reasons why things won't work. Don't do that with her. Just let it happen. After they hung up, Caleb sat in the parking lot for a while, Danny's words echoing in his mind. His friend was right. He did have a tendency to overthink, to protect himself by finding problems before they found him. It was a survival mechanism he'd developed after the divorce, a way to maintain control when everything else felt chaotic. But Nora wasn't asking for control. She was asking for presence, for someone willing to show up in the messy reality of her life without demanding she make it neat and manageable first. He could do that. He wanted to do that. The drive home took him past the cafe where they'd had their first date, and he found himself smiling at the memory. Just a week ago, he'd been standing in that parking lot trying to convince himself to go inside. Now he was planning a second date, texting goodnight messages, feeling things he'd convinced himself he'd never feel again. At home, he found Mason and his mother playing cards at the kitchen table, the casserole mostly eaten and the dishes already washed. Dad! Mason jumped up. How'd it go? Is everything okay? Everything's fine. We're having dinner at her place Saturday. Can I come? The question caught Caleb off guard. Buddy, it's a date. Adults only. But I want to meet her, make sure she's nice. Linda caught Caleb's eye, her expression sympathetic. Mason, honey, your dad needs some time with Nora alone. That doesn't mean you won't meet her eventually. When's eventually? When the time is right, Caleb said, sitting down at the table. This is all very new, Mason. We're still figuring out what it is. I need you to be patient, okay? Mason's face fell, and Caleb felt the familiar guilt of disappointing his son. But rushing things, bringing Mason into a relationship before it had a foundation, that wouldn't be fair to anyone. I promise, Caleb added, when things are more settled, you'll meet her. But for now, I need to do this my way. Can you trust me on that? Mason nodded reluctantly. I guess. After Linda left and Mason was in bed, Caleb stood at his bedroom window looking out at the dark woods surrounding his property. His phone buzzed with a text from Nora. Made it home. Mom's okay. Thank you again for tonight. I needed that more than I realized. He typed back, anytime, really, and I'm looking forward to Saturday. Me too. Fair warning, I'm not a great cook. I'm not picky. We'll see if you still say that after trying my lasagna. Lasagna sounds perfect. There was a pause, then, Caleb? I'm glad I texted you. Glad you answered. Me too. He set his phone down and got ready for bed, but sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept circling back to the park, to Nora's exhausted face and the way she'd trusted him with her vulnerability. He thought about Saturday, about meeting her mother, about stepping further into the complicated reality of her life. And instead of feeling afraid, he felt ready. The week crawled by in a blur of work and anticipation. Caleb finished the jewelry box, delivered it to grateful clients, and started on a new project, a dining table for a young couple renovating their first home. The work steadied him, the familiar rhythm of measuring and cutting and sanding providing structure to days that felt charged with possibility. Mason continued his campaign to meet Nora, bringing it up at breakfast during homework while they worked together in the shop. Caleb held firm, explaining repeatedly that relationships needed time to develop, that rushing things helped no one. But what if she doesn't like me? Mason asked Thursday night, the question coming out of nowhere. Caleb set down the sandpaper he'd been using. Why would you think she wouldn't like you? Mom's boyfriend doesn't really like me. He pretends, but I can tell. The admission hurt to hear. Buddy, that's his problem, not yours. You're an amazing kid. Smart, funny, kind. Dads have to say that. I say it because it's true. Caleb pulled his son close. Look, I can't promise Nora will like you because I can't promise where this thing with her is going. But I can promise that if she doesn't see how great you are, then she's not the right person, because anyone I bring into our lives has to understand that you come first, always. Does she know that? She knows. Good. Mason relaxed against his father. Okay, I'll wait, but not forever. Deal. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of false spring that sometimes appeared in late autumn. Caleb spent the morning working, then the afternoon getting ready, showering, changing clothes 3 times, second-guessing everything. You look fine, Mason assured him, sitting on the bed watching his father's wardrobe crisis. Just wear jeans and that blue shirt, the one Grandma got you. When did you become a fashion consultant? YouTube. Caleb went with Mason's suggestion, then stood in front of the mirror wondering if he should bring something. Wine, flowers, something to show he'd put thought into this. Bring flowers, Mason said, reading his mind again. Girls like flowers. Where am I supposed to get flowers at 4 in the afternoon? The grocery store has them. So Caleb found himself at the supermarket, standing in front of a display of sad-looking bouquets, trying to pick something that didn't seem desperate or overly romantic. He settled on a simple arrangement of daisies, hoping they struck the right balance. The drive to Nora's house took him to an older neighborhood on the east side of town, where small bungalows sat on tree-lined streets. Her address led him to a blue house with white trim, well-maintained but showing its age. A ramp led up to the front door, installed for her mother, he assumed. Caleb sat in his truck for a moment, gathering himself. This was more than a date. This was entering Nora's real life, meeting the person at the center of her world, seeing how she moved through her daily existence. It felt significant in a way their previous meetings hadn't. He grabbed the flowers and walked to the front door, his heart beating faster than the moment warranted. Before he could knock, the door opened and Nora stood there in jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair pulled back, a slightly panicked expression on her face. "Hi," she said. "Come in. Fair warning, it's chaos." "I can handle chaos." He stepped inside to find a warm, lived-in space. Photos covered the walls, family pictures spanning decades, Nora at various ages, an older couple who must have been her parents. The furniture was comfortable but worn, the kind of pieces that had seen years of use. Classical music played softly from another room. "For you," Caleb said, offering the flowers. Nora's face softened. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She took them, bringing them to her nose. "They're lovely. Let me put them in water and I'll introduce you to my mom. She's having a good day, which means she'll probably ask you a million questions." "I can handle questions." Nora led him through the living room to a sunroom at the back of the house. An elderly woman sat in a rocking chair, working on a crossword puzzle, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as they entered, and Caleb saw where Nora got her eyes, that same warm brown, though these were clouded with age and confusion. "Mom, this is Caleb, the friend I told you about." Eleanor Hayes set down her crossword and studied Caleb with an intensity that made him feel like he was being x-rayed. "You're the carpenter." "Yes, ma'am." "Nora said you have a son." "Mason. He's 8. "Good age, not too young, not yet impossible." Eleanor smiled, and he saw a flash of the sharp woman Nora had described. "Sit down, young man. Let me look at you properly." But Caleb sat in the chair Nora indicated, feeling more nervous than he had in years. This woman's opinion mattered, not just because she was Nora's mother, but because he could see the bond between them, the love that ran deep despite the disease stealing Eleanor's memories. "You treat my daughter right?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "Mom," Nora started. "I plan to," Caleb answered honestly. "Good. Because she deserves someone decent. That last husband of hers was—" Eleanor's face clouded. "What was his name?" "David," Nora supplied gently. "David. Yes, he was a pompous ass." Eleanor looked at Caleb. "You're not a pompous ass, are you?" "I try not to be." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. "Then you can stay for dinner." Dinner was a strange but comfortable affair. Nora moved around her kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling together a lasagna that looked far better than she'd given herself credit for. Caleb offered to help, but she waved him off, insisting he keep her mother company in the sunroom. Eleanor asked him questions that ranged from thoughtful to bewildering. One moment she wanted to know about his woodworking techniques. The next she was asking if he remembered a dance they'd apparently attended together in 1982. Caleb learned quickly to roll with the confusion, answering what he could and gently redirecting when necessary. "You're patient," Eleanor observed during a moment of clarity. "That's rare in men your age. They're always rushing somewhere, checking their phones, half present at best. I learned patience from my work. Wood doesn't respond well to rushing. Neither do people." Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "My daughter works too hard. Always has. Even as a girl, she took on more than she should. Tried to fix everyone's problems but her own." Caleb glanced toward the kitchen where Nora was chopping vegetables, presumably out of earshot. "She's a caregiver. It's in her nature. It's a burden, is what it is, and now she's stuck caring for me when she should be living her own life." Eleanor's voice dropped, becoming almost conspiratorial. "I'm forgetting things, you know. Important things. Sometimes I don't remember where I am or what year it is. Sometimes I look at Nora and know I should recognize her but can't quite place how." The confession hit Caleb hard. "Does Nora know you're aware of it?" "She knows some days are better than others, but I don't think she understands how terrifying it is, watching yourself disappear piece by piece." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly on her crossword puzzle. "Promise me something, Caleb. Promise me you won't let her sacrifice herself for me. She needs a life beyond these walls." "I'm not sure I have that kind of influence." "You will. I can see it in how she looks at you, like maybe there's something worth hoping for again." Eleanor reached out and patted his hand. "Just promise me you'll try." "I promise." Nora called them to dinner before Caleb could process the weight of what Eleanor had asked. They gathered around a small dining table, and the lasagna turned out to be excellent, rich and flavorful. Nothing like the disaster Nora had predicted. "This is really good," Caleb said, and meant it. "Don't sound so surprised." But Nora smiled, pleased. Eleanor ate slowly, occasionally pausing to ask who Caleb was again. Each time, Nora patiently reintroduced him, her voice never showing frustration or weariness, even though Caleb could see the toll it took. By the fifth introduction, he started answering for himself, explaining in the same gentle tone Nora used that he was a friend, that he built things from wood, that he was happy to be there. After dinner, Nora settled her mother in front of the television with a blanket and her crossword puzzle. Eleanor seemed content, the earlier sharpness fading into a comfortable fog. Caleb helped Nora clean up, working side by side at the sink in a domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and natural. "Thank you for being so good with her," Nora said quietly, her hands deep in soapy water. "Some people get uncomfortable with the repetition, with how she fades in and out. You didn't." "My grandmother had Alzheimer's. I remember what it was like, how my mom would answer the same questions over and over, always patient, always kind." Caleb dried the plate she handed him. "It's not easy. What you're doing, it takes a special kind of strength." "I don't feel strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what strength looks like sometimes. Not some heroic moment, just showing up day after day even when you're exhausted." Nora's hands stilled in the water. When she spoke again, her voice was thick. "She told you, didn't she? About how aware she is of what's happening to her." "Yeah, she did. It kills me. Watching her fight to hold on to herself, knowing she's going to lose." Nora pulled her hands from the sink, suds dripping onto the floor. "And the worst part is knowing that eventually she won't even realize what she's lost. She'll just be gone, but her body will still be here." Caleb set down the dish towel and turned her toward him. "Hey, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "You're giving her dignity. You're making sure she's safe and loved and cared for. That matters. Even when she can't remember on some level, she knows." A tear slipped down Nora's cheek and she wiped at it angrily. "I'm sorry. This is not how this evening was supposed to go. I was going to be charming and together and show you I'm not always a crying mess." "Nora, I don't need you to be charming. I just need you to be real." She laughed, the sound watery and broken. "Well, you're certainly getting that." They finished the dishes in companionable silence, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Caleb found himself thinking about Eleanor's request, about the promise he'd made. How was he supposed to help Nora live her own life when her responsibilities were so overwhelming? When every day demanded all of her energy and more? After the kitchen was clean, Nora made coffee and they settled on the back porch, a small space overlooking a garden that had clearly once been well tended, but now showed signs of neglect. The evening had cooled, and Nora wrapped herself in a cardigan, cupping her mug for warmth. "I used to love gardening," she said, looking at the overgrown flower beds. "Every spring I'd plan what to plant, spend weekends digging and planting and nurturing. Now I barely have time to keep the grass mowed." "What would you plant, if you had the time?" "Roses. I love roses, even though they're finicky and need constant attention. My mom and I used to have this whole section dedicated to different varieties: red, pink, yellow, white. The smell in summer was incredible." Nora smiled at the memory. She'd cut fresh flowers for the house every week, said a home without flowers was like a day without music. "That's beautiful." She was a poet. Did I tell you that? Never published, but she wrote constantly, journals full of observations about ordinary moments made extraordinary through language. Nora's voice softened. Sometimes I read her old entries from before she got sick, and I can hear her voice so clearly. The woman she was. The mind she had. "Do you write?" "Used to. Haven't in years. Between work and mom and everything else, there's no space left in my head for that kind of thinking." Caleb wanted to tell her she should make space, should prioritize the things that fed her soul. But he knew how hollow that advice would sound coming from someone who wasn't living her reality. So instead he said, "What did you write about?" "People, mostly. I'd sit in coffee shops and make up stories about strangers, where they were going, what they were thinking, the lives they led when they left my sight. It was a way of connecting, I guess, of feeling less alone." "You could do that now, even just for 15 minutes a day." 15 minutes feels impossible when you're this tired. Nora looked at him over her coffee mug. "You probably think I'm making excuses." "I think you're surviving. There's a difference." From inside the house came a crash, followed by Eleanor's confused voice calling for Nora. They both jumped up, Nora moving quickly through the house with Caleb following. They found Eleanor standing in the living room, a broken picture frame at her feet, glass scattered across the hardwood. "I was trying to see the photo," Eleanor said, her voice small and frightened. "I wanted to remember who those people were, but I dropped it, and now it's broken, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Mom, it's okay." Nora knelt carefully, avoiding the glass. "Don't move, there's glass everywhere. Let me clean this up." "I broke it. I ruin everything." Eleanor's hands shook. "I can't even hold on to a simple frame." Caleb grabbed a broom from the kitchen while Nora guided her mother to the couch, checking her hands and feet for cuts. He swept up the glass quickly and efficiently, retrieving the photo from the floor. It showed a younger Nora with her parents, all of them laughing at some long-ago family gathering. "Here," he said, handing the photo to Eleanor after ensuring there was no glass on it. "No harm done to what matters." Eleanor took the photo with trembling hands, studying it intensely. "That's my daughter. That's Nora. That's right. She was so happy then. Look at her smile. When did she stop smiling like that?" Eleanor looked up at Caleb, tears in her eyes. "Was it my fault? Did I take that from her?" "Mom, no," Nora started, but her voice broke. Caleb crouched down in front of Eleanor. "You didn't take anything from her. Life is hard sometimes, and people change, but that's not your fault." And Nora still smiles. "I've seen it. Maybe not like in that photo, but it's there." "You make her smile." The question caught him off guard. "Sometimes, I hope so." "Good. She needs that. She needs someone who sees her as more than just a caretaker." Eleanor pressed the photo to her chest. "I'm tired. I think I'd like to go to bed now." Nora helped her mother through the evening routine with practiced movements, getting her changed, making sure she took her evening medications, settling her into bed. Caleb waited in the living room, feeling like he'd crossed some invisible threshold into Nora's real life, the one she lived when there were no dates or coffee shop conversations to hide behind. When Nora finally emerged, she looked completely drained. She sank onto the couch beside him and dropped her head into her hands. This is my life, she said. This is what every evening looks like. Every weekend, every moment I'm not at work. And it's only going to get worse. The doctor said she's progressing faster than expected. In 6 months, maybe a year, she won't recognize me at all. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. There were no words that would make it better, no platitudes that wouldn't ring hollow. So he did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her close and let her cry. Nora cried like someone who rarely allowed themselves the release, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions she'd clearly been holding back. Caleb held her through it, his hand moving in slow circles on her back, offering the only comfort he could, presence and patience. When the storm finally passed, Nora pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heels of her hands. I'm a mess. You're human. I don't usually fall apart like this. Maybe you should more often. Holding all that in can't be healthy. She laughed weakly. My therapist says the same thing. I'm very good at compartmentalizing, apparently. Boxing up emotions and dealing with them later, except later never comes. You have a therapist? Started seeing her after the divorce. Figured if I was going to survive everything falling apart, I needed professional help. Nora leaned back against the couch, exhausted. She's the one who encouraged me to try dating again. Said isolation wasn't sustainable long-term. Smart therapist. Most of the time. Though right now she's probably wondering why I'm sabotaging this by showing you the absolute worst of my life on our second date. Caleb shifted to face her more fully. Nora, this isn't the worst of your life. This is your life. The real one, not some polished version you show strangers. And I'm grateful you're letting me see it. Even though it's depressing and overwhelming and not at all romantic. Especially because of that. He took her hand, the gesture feeling both natural and momentous. I'm not looking for romance or some fantasy version of a relationship. I'm looking for something real. And real is messy and complicated, and sometimes it means crying on your couch at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. Nora's fingers tightened around his. You say that now, but you haven't seen the really hard days yet. The ones where she doesn't know who I am. Where she gets angry and accuses me of stealing her things or trying to poison her. The days where I have to call in sick to work because she's having an episode and I can't leave her alone. Then I'll see those days when they come. If you let me. Why? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Why would you sign up for this when you could walk away right now with no consequences? You have your own life, your own responsibilities. Why add mine to them? Caleb considered the question carefully. It deserved honesty, even if the truth made him vulnerable. Because for 5 years, I've been playing it safe. Building walls, keeping people at a distance, telling myself that being a good father meant sacrificing everything else. And maybe that was what I needed for a while. But somewhere along the way, safe became empty. I stopped living and started just existing. He paused, making sure she was really hearing him. Then I met you, and you're not safe or easy or uncomplicated. But you're real, you're honest. You show up for the people you love even when it costs you everything. And that kind of person, that kind of strength, I want that in my life. I want to learn from it, support it, be part of it, if you'll let me. Nora's eyes glistened with fresh tears. I'm scared. Of what? Of letting you in and having it not work. Of starting to rely on you and then being alone again when you realize this is too much. She swallowed hard. Of wanting something for myself and feeling guilty about it because my mom needs me more. Those are all valid fears. That's it? That's all you've got? Caleb smiled slightly. What do you want me to say? That I promise it'll all work out perfectly? That I'll never disappoint you or let you down? I can't promise that, Nora. All I can promise is that I'll show up. I'll be honest with you. And I won't run away just because things get hard. Things are already hard. Then they're already hard. But maybe they'd be slightly less hard if you weren't dealing with them alone. Nora studied him for a long moment, and Caleb could see her weighing his words against her fears, trying to decide if she could trust him, if she could trust this. Finally, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, let's try this. Whatever this is. They sat like that for a while, connected in the quiet of her living room, the only sound Eleanor's soft snoring from the bedroom down the hall. Caleb felt the weight of what they were building, the fragile beginning of something that could become significant if they were brave enough to let it. Eventually, Nora pulled back, checking her watch. "It's late. You should probably get home to Mason. He's at my mom's tonight, sleepover." "So you have nowhere you need to be?" "Nowhere I need to be except right here." Nora smiled, a real smile that reminded Caleb of the photo Eleanor had broken. "Want to watch something mindless on TV? I could use some brain-dead entertainment after today." "Sounds perfect." They settled in together, Nora pulling a blanket over both of them as she scrolled through streaming options. They landed on some cooking competition show neither of them had seen, the kind of comfortable background noise that didn't require thought or attention. Caleb found himself more aware of Nora's presence beside him than anything happening on screen, the way she unconsciously leaned into him, how her breathing gradually steadied and deepened as she relaxed. Halfway through the second episode, Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Mason. "Grandma says I have to go to bed, but I wanted to say goodnight. Love you, Dad." He showed the message to Nora, who smiled. "He sounds sweet." "He is, getting to that age where he wants to act tough, but underneath he's still soft." "Does he know about me?" "He knows I've been seeing someone. He's dying to meet you, actually. Keeps asking when that can happen." "What do you tell him?" "That we're taking things slow, that he'll meet you when the time is right." Caleb pocketed his phone. "I don't want to rush him into something that might not last. He's already dealing with his mom having a new boyfriend. I need to be careful." "That makes sense." Nora was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I'd like to meet him someday, if we get to that point." "Yeah?" "Yeah, he's a huge part of your life. If I'm going to really know you, I should know him too." The casualness with which she said it, the assumption that there would be a someday, that they were building towards something lasting, settled something in Caleb's chest. This wasn't just a fling or a distraction. This was two people genuinely trying to build something real together. Around 11, Caleb heard Eleanor's voice from the bedroom calling for Nora. Nora sighed and started to get up, but Caleb gently stopped her. "Let me check on her." "You've been going all day. Take a minute." "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." He found Eleanor sitting up in bed, looking confused and frightened. "Where am I? This isn't my house." "You're in your house, Eleanor. In your bedroom." Caleb kept his voice calm and gentle. "You're safe. Nora's just in the other room." "Nora?" Eleanor's face scrunched in concentration. "My daughter?" "That's right." "Where is she? I need to see her." "I'll get her for you. Just stay right here, okay?" But when Caleb returned to the living room, he found Nora had fallen asleep on the couch, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, exhaustion finally claiming her. He stood there for a moment, torn between waking her and trying to handle Eleanor himself. He decided to try handling it himself first. Back in the bedroom, he sat in the chair beside Eleanor's bed. "Nora's resting right now. She's been taking care of you all day. How about I sit with you for a bit?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Who are you?" "I'm Caleb, a friend of Nora's." "A boyfriend?" "Maybe. We're still figuring that out." Eleanor seemed to consider this. "Are you kind to her?" "I try to be." "Good. She needs kind. She's had too much unkind in her life." Eleanor's face relaxed slightly. "Will you stay until I fall asleep? I don't like being alone in the dark." "Of course." He sat with her as her eyes gradually grew heavy, talking softly about nothing in particular, his work, Mason, the change of seasons. Eleanor drifted in and out, sometimes responding coherently, sometimes seeming confused about who he was or where they were. But his presence seemed to comfort her, and eventually her breathing evened out into sleep. Caleb returned to the living room to find Nora still asleep on the couch. He grabbed another blanket from a nearby closet and draped it over her, then settled into the armchair across from her. He should probably go home, let her wake up in her own space without the awkwardness of finding him there in the morning. But something kept him in that chair, watching over her and Eleanor both, feeling like a guardian of their fragile peace. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, gray dawn light was filtering through the windows and Nora was stirring on the couch. She blinked awake slowly, disoriented, then sat up quickly when she saw him. "Caleb, did you stay all night?" Sorry, I was going to leave, but I fell asleep in the chair. You didn't have to stay. Your mom woke up confused around 11. I sat with her until she fell back asleep, and then I guess I just stayed. He stretched, his neck protesting the awkward sleeping position. How are you feeling? Like I fell asleep with my contacts in. Nora rubbed her eyes. What time is it? Little after 6. You should have woken me up, sent me to bed. You needed the sleep. Nora stood, the blanket falling away, and moved to the window. Sunday morning light painted her features soft and vulnerable. No one's done that before, stayed when things got hard. My ex-husband used to find excuses to be elsewhere when my dad was sick, said he couldn't handle seeing someone deteriorate like that. I'm not him. No, you're definitely not. She turned to look at Caleb, something shifting in her expression. This is the point where I usually pull back, where I decide it's too much to ask someone to deal with, and I push them away before they can leave on their own. Are you going to do that now? Nora was quiet for a long moment. I don't want to. That scares me more than anything, how much I don't want to push you away. Caleb stood and crossed to where she stood by the window. Then don't. We'll figure this out together, messy and complicated and all of it. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. Before Nora could respond, Eleanor's voice drifted from the bedroom. Nora? Are you there? I'm here, Mom, Nora called back, then looked at Caleb. I need to help her with her morning routine, get her breakfast, make sure she takes her medications. I should probably head out anyway. Let you have your Sunday. Will I see you again soon? If you want to. I want to. Nora reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you. For staying. For everything. Caleb left as the sun was fully rising, driving home through empty streets with his mind full of the night before. The weight of Eleanor's confusion, Nora's exhaustion, the intimacy of witnessing her life in its rawest form. It all settled over him with a strange sense of rightness. He'd crossed a threshold last night, moved from possibility into reality, from the idea of being part of Nora's life into actually being in it. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt purposeful. Like maybe this was what he'd been missing all along, not romance or excitement, but the deep satisfaction of showing up for someone who needed him. At home, he showered and changed, then drove to his mother's house to pick up Mason. Linda took one look at his face and smiled. Good night? She asked. Different night. Important night. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't, really, but that's okay. Mason bounded out of the house with his overnight bag, chattering about the movie he and his grandmother had watched. In the truck on the way home, he finally paused for breath and asked, How was your date? It was good, really good. Did you kiss her? Mason, it's a fair question. That's what people do on dates. No, I didn't kiss her. We're taking things slow, remember? Slow is boring. Slow is smart, especially when there are important people involved who need time to adjust. Caleb glanced at his son. Speaking of which, I think you'll meet her soon, if you still want to. Mason's face lit up. Really? When? I don't know yet, but soon. We're getting to that point. Is she nice? She's very nice. And she has a lot going on in her life, so when you do meet her, I need you to be patient and understanding. I'm always patient and understanding, Caleb laughed. Sure you are, kid. The rest of Sunday passed in their normal routine. Breakfast together, time in the workshop. Mason's homework spread across the kitchen table, while Caleb prepped meals for the week. Normal, ordinary, the life they'd built together. But underneath it all, Caleb felt something new beginning to take root. Something that felt like hope and possibility and the promise of more. His phone buzzed with a message from Nora around 8 that night. Mom's having a better evening. Thanks again for last night. You didn't have to do all that, but I'm glad you did. Anytime, he typed back. How are you holding up? Tired. But okay. Better than okay, actually. Good. Get some rest. You too. Talk tomorrow? Definitely. Caleb set his phone down and looked around his quiet cabin. Mason was in bed, the workshop was clean, everything in its place. His carefully constructed life of routine and safety and controlled risk. But now there was Nora, bringing complexity and chaos, and the kind of connection he'd thought he'd never find again. And instead of feeling threatened by it, instead of wanting to retreat back into his protective walls, Caleb felt ready. Ready to let someone in, ready to build something new, ready to believe that maybe second chances were real after all. The week that followed brought a shift in rhythm between them. Text messages became daily occurrences. Good morning check-ins, photos of small moments, questions about each other's days. Caleb found himself reaching for his phone during work breaks, smiling at Nora's observations about difficult patients or her mother's increasingly creative interpretations of reality. She sent him a picture of Eleanor attempting to organize the spice cabinet alphabetically, but getting confused between cumin and cinnamon, the whole thing ending with spices scattered across the kitchen counter and her mother laughing at the chaos. She hasn't laughed like that in weeks, Nora texted. I'll take the mess. Caleb responded with a photo of Mason covered in sawdust after insisting he could help sand a cabinet door. Solidarity in chaos. They spoke on the phone most evenings after Mason was asleep and Eleanor had settled for the night. Conversations that meandered from serious to silly, from childhood memories to current worries. Nora told him about her failed attempt at nursing school, about the guilt she still carried over choosing financial stability over passion. Caleb shared stories about his marriage, filling in details he'd glossed over before, the slow erosion of trust, the nights he'd spent wondering what he'd done wrong, the relief mixed with devastation when Jenna finally left. Do you ever miss it? Nora asked one night. Being married, I mean, not her specifically, but having that partnership? Caleb considered the question carefully. I miss the idea of it, coming home to someone, having another adult to talk through decisions with, not carrying everything alone, but I don't miss the reality of what my marriage actually was. The constant feeling that I wasn't enough, that I was somehow failing without understanding how. I know that feeling. David had this way of making me feel simultaneously too much and not enough. Too emotional, but not passionate enough. Too focused on my family, but not invested enough in his career goals. It was exhausting trying to be whatever version of myself he needed in any given moment. You're not too much, Caleb said firmly, and you're definitely enough. You don't know that. You've only seen pieces of me. Then show me more pieces. I'm not going anywhere. The following Saturday, Nora suggested they do something together with their families. I know we said slow, she explained over the phone, but I think Mason and my mom should meet you in context. See that you're not just disappearing on dates, but actually building something real. Caleb felt his chest tighten with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. What did you have in mind? The farmer's market downtown. It's busy but not overwhelming. We can walk around, grab lunch, keep it casual. If things get awkward, there are plenty of distractions. Mason will be excited. He's been asking about you constantly. What have you told him? That you're important to me. That I'm hoping this becomes something lasting. Caleb paused. Is that okay? That I said that? It's more than okay. It's honest. Nora's voice softened. I'm nervous about this, Caleb. What if they don't get along? What if Mason doesn't like me, or my mom has a bad day and scares him? Then we deal with it. But I think it's going to be fine. Mason's curious and kind, and your mom was charming when I met her, even with the confusion. Charming is one word for it. Unpredictable is another. They agreed to meet at the market entrance at 10. Caleb spent Friday evening preparing Mason, explaining that they'd be meeting Nora and her mother, that Eleanor had memory problems and might ask the same questions multiple times, that it was important to be patient and kind. I know how to be nice to old people, Mason protested. Grandma's old. Your grandmother is vintage, not old. There's a difference. What's Nora like? Really? Caleb thought about how to describe her to his son. She's honest. She doesn't pretend things are perfect when they're not. She works really hard and takes care of her mom even when it's difficult. And she makes me feel like myself, like I don't have to be anything other than who I am. Do you love her? The question caught Caleb completely off guard. That's a pretty big question, bud. It's a yes or no question. It's more complicated than that. I care about her a lot. I think I could love her. Maybe already I'm starting to, but love takes time to grow. Mason seemed satisfied with this answer. Okay. I hope I like her. Me too. Saturday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather. Crisp air, brilliant sunshine, leaves turning gold and red on the trees lining Main Street. The farmer's market was already bustling when Caleb and Mason arrived, vendors calling out their wares, the scent of fresh bread and coffee filling the air. Caleb spotted Nora near the entrance, Eleanor beside her in a wheelchair that surprised him. Nora saw his expression and explained as they approached, "She's having a harder morning. Her balance is off, and I didn't want to risk her falling in the crowd." "That's smart." Caleb turned to Eleanor. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." Eleanor looked up at him with cloudy recognition. "I know you. You're the furniture man." "That's right, and this is my son, Mason." Mason stepped forward, suddenly shy in a way Caleb rarely saw. "Hi. It's nice to meet you." "Well, aren't you polite?" Eleanor smiled at him. "How old are you, young man?" 8. I'll be 9 in February." 9 is a good age. My daughter was 9 when she decided she wanted to be president. She made campaign posters and everything, put them all over the house. Eleanor's eyes drifted to Nora. "You're my daughter, aren't you?" "I am, Mom." Nora's voice carried practiced patience. "You were going to be president." "That was a long time ago. I changed my mind." "Shame. You would have been good at it." Eleanor turned her attention back to Mason. "Do you want to be president?" "Not really. I want to build things like my dad." "Also a noble profession. The world needs both builders and leaders." They started walking through the market, Caleb pushing Eleanor's wheelchair while Nora and Mason fell into step ahead of them. Caleb watched as his son pointed out various booths to Nora, asking questions about the produce and crafts, gradually losing his shyness. Nora responded to him with genuine interest, not the condescending tone some adults used with children, but real engagement. "She's good with him," Eleanor observed quietly. "She's good with everyone, seems like." "She's had practice. Used to volunteer at the children's hospital before her father got sick. She'd read to the kids, play games with them. Made them feel normal for a little while." Eleanor's hands trembled in her lap. "I worry what will happen to her when I'm gone. She's given up so much to take care of me. She does it because she loves you." "I know. That's what makes it worse." Eleanor looked up at him. "You'll take care of her, won't you, after?" The question felt weighted with more than Eleanor probably realized. "I'll do my best." "Good. She needs someone who sees her strength but doesn't exploit it. Someone who gives as much as he takes." They stopped at a produce stand where Mason was excitedly telling Nora about the time he and Caleb had tried to grow tomatoes and ended up with plants that produced exactly 3 tiny, misshapen fruits. Nora laughed, the sound bright and genuine, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This was right. These 4 people, together in this moment, felt inexplicably right. They bought apples and fresh bread, honey from a local beekeeper, and flowers that Nora insisted on getting despite Eleanor's protest that they'd just die anyway. At a craft booth, Mason became fascinated with a wooden puzzle box, the kind with hidden compartments and secret mechanisms. Caleb watched as Nora crouched down to his level, examining the box with him, asking the vendor questions about how it was made. "Can we get it?" Mason asked. "That's pretty expensive, bud. Maybe for your birthday." "I could buy it for him," Nora offered. "An early birthday present." Mason's eyes went wide. "Really? Only if your dad says it's okay." Caleb felt torn between not wanting Nora to spend her money and the joy on his son's face. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to." Nora smiled at Mason. "Every 9-year-old should have a good puzzle box." She purchased it over Caleb's weak protests, and Mason clutched it like treasure, already working on figuring out the mechanisms. They found a bench in the park adjacent to the market and settled there, Eleanor dozing in her wheelchair, Mason absorbed in his puzzle, while Caleb and Nora sat side by side. "Thank you for this," Caleb said quietly. "The box, but also just this whole morning. It's been nice, normal, almost." Nora watched Mason's focused concentration. "He's a great kid. You've done a good job with him." "I've tried. Some days I feel like I'm making it all up as I go." "I think that's all any of us are doing, just hoping we don't screw up too badly." Mason suddenly looked up from his puzzle. "I got the first compartment open. There's another puzzle inside." "That's how those work," Nora explained. Each solution leads to another challenge. It's like a story in wood. You have to earn each new chapter. That's so cool. Mason scooted closer to show her his progress. Can you help me with the next part? I don't know how. That's the fun of it. We figure it out together. Caleb watched them work on the puzzle, their heads bent together, Nora treating Mason like a person worth listening to rather than a child to be managed. He thought about what Eleanor had said, about Nora volunteering with sick children, about her natural way of connecting with people. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How's it going? Really well, he typed back. Better than I hoped. Eleanor stirred, waking with a confused expression. She looked around, seeming disoriented by the park and the crowds. Where are we? Why am I here? We're at the farmer's market, Mom. Remember? We came to get fresh apples. I don't remember. Eleanor's voice rose, panic edging in. I want to go home. I want to go home right now. Mason looked up, startled by Eleanor's distress. Nora immediately shifted into caregiver mode, her voice soothing. Okay, we can go home. It's fine. Let's just get you back to the car. I can help, Caleb offered. No, it's... Nora started, then stopped herself. Actually, yes, that would be good. They made their way back through the market, Eleanor growing increasingly agitated, asking repeatedly where they were and why they'd left her house. People stared, some with sympathy, others with uncomfortable curiosity. Mason walked close to his father, his earlier joy dimmed by the sudden shift in atmosphere. At Nora's car, Caleb helped get Eleanor settled in the passenger seat, while Nora folded the wheelchair and stored it in the trunk. Her movements were efficient, but her face was tight with stress. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This happens sometimes. She'll be fine once we get home, but the transition can be rough. Don't apologize, it's not your fault. I thought she'd be okay for a few hours. I shouldn't have pushed it. Nora. Caleb waited until she looked at him. You deserve to have a life outside your house. We had a good morning. One difficult moment doesn't erase that. From inside the car, Eleanor called out, Nora, please. I want to go home. I need to get her back. Nora glanced at Mason, who was standing a few feet away, still clutching his puzzle box. Tell him I'm sorry the morning got cut short. He's fine. We're both fine. Caleb squeezed her arm gently. Text me when you're settled, okay? Okay? Nora got in the car and Caleb watched her drive away, Eleanor's confused questions audible even through the closed windows. Mason came to stand beside him. Is Mrs. Hayes going to be okay? Yeah, bud. Her brain just gets confused sometimes. It's scary for her when she can't remember things. Is Nora okay? The question was more perceptive than Caleb expected. She will be. Taking care of someone who's sick is really hard, and sometimes things don't go the way you plan. I like her, Mason said simply. Nora, I mean. She's nice, and she didn't treat me like a baby. I like her too. Are you going to marry her? Mason, we've been over this. We're nowhere near that. But you could see it happening, eventually. Caleb looked down at his son, at the serious expression on his young face. Yeah, eventually I could see it happening. Good, because I think she needs us, her and Mrs. Hayes. The observation hit Caleb hard. What makes you say that? She looked really tired and kind of sad, even when she was smiling, like she's trying really hard to be happy, but it's work. Mason clutched his puzzle box. We should help her, like she helped us by getting me this gift. How do you think we should help? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Mason started walking toward their truck. That's what families do, right? They help each other? Caleb followed his son, his mind spinning. When had Mason started thinking of Nora and Eleanor as family? When had they crossed from Dad's girlfriend and her mom to something more integrated in his son's worldview? The answer came to him as they drove home. It had happened naturally, the way all real connections did. Not through grand declarations or formal decisions, but through small moments of genuine care and attention. That evening, after Mason was in bed, Caleb called Nora. She answered on the first ring, her voice exhausted. Hey, sorry I didn't text earlier. It took a while to get Mom calmed down. How is she now? Asleep, finally. Nora sighed. I feel terrible about this morning. Everything was going so well, and then... Stop. The morning was great. Mason had a wonderful time. And seeing you with him, watching you two connect, it meant everything to me. Really? Really? He told me on the way home that he thinks we should help you, you and your mom, because that's what families do. Nora was quiet for a long moment. He said that? He's a pretty intuitive kid, sees things I sometimes miss. Caleb, I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel committed. There's a difference. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know this is moving fast, and I know we said slow. But the truth is, I can't picture my life now without you in it. And neither can Mason, apparently. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand, where we stand. This is terrifying, Nora admitted, letting you in like this. What if I can't be what you need? What if it works? Caleb interrupted. What if instead of cataloging all the ways it could fail, we just let it be what it is? That's very zen of you. I'm a carpenter. We think in practical terms. Nora laughed, the sound easing some of the tension. I want this to work. I really do. Then let's make it work, together. They talked for another hour, the conversation eventually drifting to lighter topics. Nora told him about a patient at work who'd insisted her medical records had been replaced with someone else's because she refused to believe she was actually 73. Caleb shared Mason's latest YouTube obsession, some channel about kids building elaborate cardboard structures. When they finally said goodnight, Caleb lay in bed feeling both energized and peaceful. The complications weren't going away. Eleanor's condition would only worsen, Nora's responsibilities would only grow heavier, and integrating their lives would require constant negotiation and compromise. But for the first time in 5 years, Caleb wasn't afraid of the complications. He was ready for them. The following week brought an unexpected challenge. Nora called Tuesday evening, her voice tight with stress. The daytime aide quit, just gave her notice today, said it was too much for what the position paid. And I can't find a replacement on short notice, which means I either have to take time off work or leave mom alone. And I can't do either of those things. Caleb could hear the panic beneath her words. What about tomorrow? Do you have coverage? The agency is trying to send someone, but they can't guarantee anything. If no one shows up, I'm stuck. She let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't dump this on you. I just needed to tell someone. What time do you need to be at work? 8. Why? I can come over. Stay with Eleanor until the aide arrives or you get home, whichever comes first. Caleb, no, you have your own work. I can move things around. I'm in the middle of a project, but the client's flexible. Family emergency. I'm not your family. You're close enough. Let me do this, Nora. She was quiet, and he could practically hear her weighing independence against necessity, pride against practical need. Finally, she said, Are you sure? Completely sure. Wednesday morning, Caleb dropped Mason at school and drove to Nora's house. She answered the door looking harried, already dressed for work, but clearly reluctant to leave. Thank you for this. I mean it. She led him inside where Eleanor sat at the kitchen table working on a crossword puzzle. Mom, this is Caleb, remember? He's going to stay with you today. Eleanor looked up, her expression vague. Are you the new aide? Something like that. I'm a friend of Nora's. Nora's my daughter. That's right. Nora walked Caleb through the routine. Eleanor's medication schedule, what she typically ate for lunch, warning signs that she was getting agitated or confused. She'd written everything down on a detailed list, her handwriting neat but slightly shaky. If anything goes wrong, call me immediately. I can leave work if I need to. It'll be fine. Go. We've got this. Caleb squeezed her shoulder. Right, Eleanor? Eleanor looked between them, seeming to understand on some level that this was important. We'll be fine. I don't need a babysitter. I know you don't, but I make excellent company anyway. After Nora left, Caleb settled into the strange intimacy of being alone in someone else's home with their vulnerable parent. Eleanor seemed content with her crossword, occasionally asking him for help with clues. They worked together companionably, and Caleb found himself relaxing into the rhythm of it. Around 10, Eleanor grew restless. I should do something. I can't just sit here all day. What would you like to do? I don't know. Something useful. Caleb remembered Nora mentioning her mother's love of gardening. Want to work in the garden? It could use some attention. Eleanor's face brightened. Yes, the roses need deadheading, and the beds need weeding. They spent the next hour outside, Eleanor directing Caleb on what needed to be done while she pulled weeds from her wheelchair. She seemed more present outside, more connected to herself, her hands moving with practiced familiarity among the plants. Nora used to help me with this, Eleanor said, carefully removing a dead rose bloom. Before everything got so complicated, we'd spend whole Saturdays out here, talking about everything and nothing. I miss that. I miss her. She's not gone, Caleb said gently. She might as well be. All she does now is work and take care of me. That's not a life, that's just existing. Eleanor's hands stilled. I'm stealing her future one day at a time. You're not stealing anything. She chooses to be here. Because she's good and dutiful and feels obligated, not because she wants to. I think it's both. Obligation and love aren't mutually exclusive. Eleanor looked at him with sudden clarity. You care about her, really care about her. I do. Then help her let me go when the time comes. Don't let her cling to someone who's already mostly gone. Promise me. The request felt enormous, impossible. Eleanor, promise me. Because if you really care about my daughter, you'll understand that sometimes love means letting go, even when it breaks your heart. Before Caleb could respond, Eleanor's expression clouded again, the moment of clarity passing. She returned to her weeding as if the conversation had never happened, humming a tune Caleb didn't recognize. They went back inside for lunch, and Caleb made sandwiches while Eleanor napped in her recliner. He found himself wandering Nora's house, seeing it with new eyes now that he was alone in it. The photos on the walls told a story. A happy family, years of memories, Eleanor as a vibrant woman with sharp eyes and an easy smile. Nora as a child, a teenager, a bride on her wedding day, looking uncertain even then. His phone buzzed with a text from Nora. How's it going? Any disasters? No disasters. We did some gardening. She's napping now. You did gardening? With my mom, she directed. I executed. The roses look better. Thank you. Seriously, I owe you. You don't owe me anything. The agency called around too to say they'd found a replacement aide who could start tomorrow. Caleb relayed the information to Nora, who responded with obvious relief. When Eleanor woke from her nap, she seemed disoriented again, asking where she was and why Caleb was in her house. He patiently reintroduced himself, explained the situation, and suggested they watch television together. They settled on a cooking show, Eleanor occasionally commenting on the techniques being used, sometimes lucid and insightful, other times confused about what was happening. Nora arrived home at 5:30 to find them watching a baking competition, Eleanor offering passionate opinions about proper meringue technique. How did it go? Nora asked, setting down her work bag. Great. We gardened, had lunch, and now we're learning about Swiss meringue versus Italian meringue. Italian is superior, Eleanor declared. More stable, better texture. Nora looked between them, something soft in her expression. Thank you, Caleb, really. Any time. He stood, stretching. The new aide starts tomorrow, by the way. Agency called this afternoon. I know. They texted me. Nora walked him to the door, stepping outside with him for privacy. I don't know how to thank you for this. You gave up a whole day of work. Nora, stop. I wanted to help, and honestly, it was nice. Your mom is good company when she's present. She asked for you specifically before her nap, said she liked the patient furniture man. Nora smiled. I think you made an impression. The feeling's mutual. They stood on the porch, the evening air cool around them, and Caleb found himself moving closer, drawn by the tiredness in Nora's eyes and the gratitude in her expression. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture intimate and careful. I meant what I said. Anytime you need help, I'm here. I'm starting to believe that. Good. Nora leaned into him slightly, and Caleb wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she released some of the tension she'd been carrying all day. They stood like that for a long moment, connected and quiet, and Caleb thought about Eleanor's request. Help her let go when the time comes. But that time wasn't now. Now was for showing up, for being present, for building something strong enough to weather what was coming. I should get home to Mason, he said eventually. But call me tonight? I will. Driving home, Caleb thought about the strange trajectory of his life. A month ago, he'd been standing in a parking lot trying to convince himself to go on a blind date. Now he was spending days caring for his girlfriend's mother, thinking in terms of our future instead of my future. And his 8-year-old was planning how they could help this woman who'd somehow become family. It was fast and complicated and probably impractical. But it was also real and right, and exactly what Caleb hadn't known he was looking for. At home, Mason wanted to hear everything about the day with Eleanor. Caleb told him about the gardening, the crossword puzzles, the baking show debates. "Do you think Mrs. Hayes is scared?" Mason asked. "About forgetting everything?" "I think she probably is, when she's aware enough to understand what's happening." "That's really sad." "It is. But that's why what Nora's doing matters so much. She's making sure her mom isn't alone in it, that she's safe and cared for even when she can't fully understand what's happening." Mason was quiet for a moment, processing. "When I'm old and forget stuff, will you take care of me like that?" The question pierced Caleb's heart. "Of course I will, bud. Always. And if Nora's really part of our family, we'd help her too, right? If she needed it? That's the whole point of family. Being there for each other, especially in the hard times. Then we should probably make her part of our family officially, shouldn't we?" Caleb laughed despite himself. "Mason, marriage isn't something you do just to be helpful." "I know, but you love her, right?" Yeah, I think I do." "Then what are you waiting for?" "For the right time, for making sure it's what we both want, for it to be perfect?" Mason interrupted. "Dad, nothing's perfect. You taught me that. You said the best things have flaws because that's what makes them real." Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds, Caleb thought. When had his son become so wise? "You're right, but there's still a difference between rushing and being ready." "Okay, but don't wait too long. Nora needs us now, not someday." That night, after Mason was asleep, Caleb sat in his workshop running his hands over a piece of unfinished wood. The grain was beautiful, the potential clear, but it needed work, patience, attention, care, to become what it was meant to be. His relationship with Nora was like that. Raw and beautiful and full of potential, but requiring patience and care to shape into something lasting. His phone rang. Nora's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," he answered. "How's your evening?" "Better now that I'm talking to you." She sounded tired but peaceful. "Mom went to bed early. I'm sitting in her garden looking at the roses you worked on today. They needed help." "So did I." "And you showed up." Nora paused. "That's not something I'm used to, Caleb. People showing up when things are hard." "Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." They talked until Nora's voice grew heavy with exhaustion, until she was yawning between sentences and her words started to slur together. Caleb finally insisted she get some sleep, and she reluctantly agreed. After they hung up, Caleb sat in the quiet of his workshop, thinking about promises and presents, about showing up and staying even when things got complicated. He thought about Eleanor's request, about the future that was coming whether they were ready for it or not, and he thought about Mason's words. Nora needs us now, not someday. His son was right. The time for hesitation had passed. Now was the time for commitment, for choosing to be all in even when the path ahead was uncertain. Caleb picked up his phone and texted Nora. "I love you, just wanted you to know." The response came quickly. "I love you too. Have for a while now. Why didn't you say anything? Same reason you didn't. Fear." "But I'm done being afraid. Me too. Good. Now go to sleep. Tomorrow's another day." "Tomorrow's another day," Caleb repeated to himself, setting his phone aside and finally heading to bed. And whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. The words hung between them across the phone line like a bridge finally completed, connecting two people who'd been circling each other with careful hope. Caleb lay in bed that night replaying Nora's text in his mind, the simple declaration that carried the weight of everything they'd been building toward. Love. Not the wild, reckless kind that burned hot and fast, but something steadier, something that had grown in the spaces between difficult moments and honest conversations. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Caleb and Mason began spending more time at Nora's house, integrating themselves into the daily routine of her life. Mason would do his homework at Eleanor's kitchen table while Nora prepared dinner, occasionally looking up to help Eleanor remember what day it was or what they'd eaten for lunch. The boy had a natural gentleness with her, never showing frustration when she asked the same question for the 5th time, treating each repetition like it was the first. "You're good with her," Nora observed one evening, watching Mason patiently explain his math homework to Eleanor, who'd asked what he was working on 3 times in 10 minutes. "She listens like she really cares," Mason said simply. "Even if she forgets, in that moment she cares. That's what matters." Caleb felt his chest swell with pride. His son understood something many adults never learned, that presence mattered more than memory, that connection could exist even in the midst of loss. Eleanor's condition continued its inevitable decline. Some days she was sharp and present, offering observations that cut right to the heart of things. Other days she drifted, caught in memories from decades past, calling Nora by her sister's name or asking about people long dead. The new aide was competent but clinical, doing her job without the warmth Eleanor responded to. Nora started asking Caleb to cover more often, and he rearranged his work schedule to accommodate, bringing his laptop and sketches to her house, working from her kitchen table while Eleanor napped or watched her cooking shows. "You don't have to do this," Nora told him repeatedly. "I can manage." "I know you can, but you don't have to manage alone anymore." It was mid-November when everything shifted. Caleb was at Nora's house on a Tuesday afternoon, Mason at school, when Eleanor had what Nora later called the bad episode. She'd been agitated all morning, convinced that strangers had broken into her house and rearranged everything. No amount of reassurance could calm her. She'd worked herself into a state of panic, hyperventilating and crying, until Nora had to call her doctor. Caleb arrived to find Nora on the phone with the medical office, Eleanor sobbing in her wheelchair, completely inconsolable. He took over with Eleanor while Nora finished the call, sitting on the floor beside the wheelchair and talking in low, soothing tones about nothing in particular: the weather, the birds outside the window, the smell of coffee from the kitchen. Gradually, Eleanor's breathing slowed. Her tears stopped. She looked at him with confused but calmer eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice small. "I'm Caleb. A friend. Where's my daughter?" "She's right here, just on the phone." Nora hung up and knelt beside them, taking her mother's hand. "I'm here, Mom. It's okay. You're safe." "I was scared. I didn't know where I was." "I know, but you're home. You're always safe here." Eleanor's gaze drifted between them, and for a moment clarity returned to her eyes. "You two love each other." It wasn't a question. Nora glanced at Caleb, something passing between them. "Yes, Mom. We do." "Good. Everyone should have someone who shows up when they're scared." Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I'm so tired of being scared." The doctor recommended a medication adjustment and suggested it might be time to consider additional support, possibly a memory care facility in the near future. Nora took the news like a physical blow, her face going pale, her hands shaking as she hung up the phone. "I can't put her in a facility," she said, her voice hollow. "I promised her I wouldn't." "What did you promise exactly?" Caleb asked gently. "That I'd take care of her. That she wouldn't end up in some institution, forgotten and alone. Taking care of her doesn't mean doing it all yourself. And a memory care facility isn't abandonment. It's specialized help when the needs become more than one person can handle." "You don't understand. My father died in a nursing home. She hated how he was treated, how impersonal everything was. She made me swear she'd never end up like that." Caleb pulled her close. "That's a heavy promise to make someone keep." "It's the promise I made." Nora's voice broke. "And I don't know how to keep it anymore." They sat together on her couch while Eleanor napped, exhausted from her episode. Nora cried quietly against Caleb's shoulder, and he held her, offering no solutions because there weren't any easy ones. Sometimes loving someone meant witnessing their pain without trying to fix it. That evening, after Mason had gone to bed, Caleb called his mother. "Mom, can I ask you something about Grandma? About when she was sick?" Linda was quiet for a moment. "Of course, honey. What do you want to know?" "How did you decide it was time for the memory care facility?" "Ah." His mother's voice carried understanding. Nora's mother is getting worse. Yeah, and Nora made a promise she's not sure she can keep. I made the same promise to your grandmother, swore I'd never put her in a home, that I'd care for her myself no matter what. Linda sighed. But there came a point where I couldn't keep her safe anymore. She'd wander out of the house at night, turn on the stove and forget about it, fall and hurt herself. I was terrified I'd wake up one morning and find her dead because I'd been too stubborn to admit I was in over my head. What made you finally do it? Your grandmother, actually. She had a lucid moment one day and told me she was scared. Scared she'd hurt herself or burn the house down or worse. She said she loved me, but she needed more help than I could give her. That it wasn't giving up, it was choosing safety over pride. Linda's voice softened. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is admit we need help. How do I tell Nora that? You don't. You just support her while she figures it out herself. And you remind her that her mother's dignity isn't tied to where she lives. It's tied to being loved and safe and treated with respect. That can happen in a facility just as much as at home, if you choose the right place. After they hung up, Caleb sat in his quiet cabin thinking about promises and love, about the difference between what we say we'll do and what circumstances allow. He thought about Eleanor's request in the garden. Help her let me go when the time comes. Maybe this was part of that. Maybe letting go didn't mean death, but accepting that the help needed had grown beyond what love alone could provide. The following weekend, Nora asked Caleb to go with her to tour a memory care facility the doctor had recommended. She was nervous, her hands trembling as they drove across town to a modern building set back from the road, surrounded by gardens and walking paths. I feel like I'm betraying her, Nora admitted as they pulled into the parking lot. You're exploring options. That's not betrayal. The facility was nothing like the sterile nursing home nightmare Nora had feared. The rooms were bright and personalized, the staff warm and attentive, the common areas designed to feel like home rather than an institution. They watched as a woman led a small group in singing old standards, the residents joining in with varying degrees of accuracy, all of them smiling. Another resident worked in a raised garden bed, a staff member beside her offering gentle guidance. We focus on dignity and quality of life, the director explained as she showed them around. Memory care isn't about warehousing people. It's about creating an environment where they can be safe and engaged, where their remaining abilities are honored even as their losses are accommodated. Nora asked careful questions about staff ratios, training, how they handled episodes like Eleanor's. The director answered each one thoughtfully, showing them the medication protocols, the activity schedules, the ways they personalized care for each resident. In one room, they saw a wall covered in photos and memorabilia from a resident's life, a visual biography that staff and visitors could use to connect with her even as her own memories faded. Nora stopped, staring at it. We encourage families to create these memory walls, the director said. It helps our residents feel grounded in their history, and it helps staff provide more personalized care. We can talk about their past, their interests, the people they loved. It maintains their sense of self. After the tour, they sat in the car in silence. Caleb waited, letting Nora process what they'd seen. It was nice, she finally said, her voice small. Really nice. Not what I expected. But it still feels like giving up, like I'm choosing convenience over commitment. Nora, look at me. Caleb waited until she met his eyes. You've given your mother everything, your time, your energy, your life. You've sacrificed relationships and opportunities and your own well-being to care for her. That's not nothing. That's incredible love. But love also means recognizing when the situation has grown beyond what you can handle alone. What if she hates me for it? She won't remember long enough to hate you. And in her lucid moments, I think she'd understand. She told me herself that she feels like she's stealing your future. She doesn't want that for you. Nora's eyes filled with tears. I'm so tired, Caleb. I'm so tired of being strong and responsible and holding it all together. I just want someone else to carry some of this weight. Then let them. Let the professionals do what they're trained for. It doesn't mean you're abandoning her. It means you're making sure she gets the best care possible. He took her hand. And it means you get some of your life back. The ability to be her daughter instead of just her caretaker. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. You, me, Mason, will help you remember who you are beyond all this. That night, Nora sat with her mother and tried to explain the situation. Eleanor's understanding drifted in and out, but in a moment of clarity, she squeezed Nora's hand and said, "Do what you need to do, sweetheart. I trust you." It took another month to make all the arrangements, to prepare Eleanor's room at the facility with photos and familiar objects, to transition her care gradually. Caleb was there for every step, helping move furniture, hanging pictures, sitting with Eleanor during her first confused days in the new environment. Mason came too, bringing his puzzle box to show Eleanor, talking to her about school and his latest YouTube discoveries. The boy had an uncanny ability to ground her in the present moment, his young voice cutting through her confusion. "Why am I here?" Eleanor asked during one visit, looking around the unfamiliar room with frightened eyes. "Because you need more help than Nora can give you at home," Mason explained patiently. "But she visits every day, and we bring you flowers, see?" He pointed to the vase of roses on her nightstand. "From your garden." "My garden." Eleanor's face softened. "I had roses. Beautiful roses. You still do. Nora takes care of them. She says you taught her everything about gardening." "I did, didn't I?" Eleanor smiled, the fear fading. "I was a good teacher." "The best," Mason agreed. The transition was hard on Nora. She visited daily, often arriving straight from work and staying through dinner, feeding her mother and talking to her even when Eleanor didn't seem to recognize her. Caleb watched her struggle with guilt and grief, mourning the loss of her mother even though Eleanor was still alive, still sometimes present. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved?" Nora asked one night, curled against Caleb on his couch. Mason was asleep, the cabin quiet around them. "That I can come home to an empty house and not have to worry about whether she's okay, whether she's taken her medication, whether she's going to have an episode in the middle of the night. It's not wrong. It's human. I miss her, the her she used to be, but I don't miss the constant responsibility, and that makes me feel like a terrible daughter." "You're not a terrible daughter. You're a daughter who gave everything she had and finally accepted help when she needed it." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "That's strength, not weakness. My therapist says the same thing. I'm working on believing it." With Eleanor settled in memory care, Nora slowly began reclaiming pieces of her life. She joined Caleb and Mason for dinner more often, helped Mason with school projects, started sleeping through the night without waking in panic wondering if her mother was okay. The exhaustion that had etched itself into her features gradually eased, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "I forgot what it feels like to not be constantly worried," she told Caleb one evening in mid-December. They were decorating his Christmas tree while Mason strung popcorn with intense concentration. "I can actually think about things other than medication schedules and doctor's appointments." "What are you thinking about instead?" "The future. Ours, specifically." Nora hung an ornament, a wooden star Caleb had made years ago, and turned to face him. "I want to be part of this. Your life. Mason's life. Not just visiting, but actually part of it." Caleb's heart rate picked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I love Mason. I love the life you've built here, and I want to build something with you." She smiled, vulnerable and hopeful. "I'm saying I'm ready if you are." Before Caleb could respond, Mason piped up from across the room. "Are you asking Dad to marry you? Because that's supposed to be his job." "Mason," Caleb started. "What?" "It's true. And you've been carrying that ring around for 2 weeks. I saw it in your dresser drawer when I was looking for socks." Nora's eyes went wide. "You have a ring?" Caleb shot his son a look that promised they'd discuss boundaries later, then turned back to Nora. "I was waiting for the right moment. This isn't exactly how I planned." "It's perfect," Nora interrupted. "It's exactly right. Messy and complicated and honest. Can I at least do this properly?" Caleb went to his bedroom and retrieved the small box he'd been carrying like a secret, his heart pounding. When he returned, Nora was crying, and Mason was grinning like he'd personally orchestrated the whole thing. Caleb knelt in front of Nora, the box opened to reveal a simple band with a single stone. Nothing flashy, just honest and real. "Nora Hayes, you walked into my life through a joke-blind date and turned everything upside down. You showed me that being scared of something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. That real love isn't perfect. It's present. It shows up. It stays. It grows through the hard parts. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I love you. Mason loves you. We want you with us, building a life together, facing whatever comes. Will you marry me? Nora dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, absolutely yes. Mason whooped and jumped on them both, the three of them collapsing into a laughing, crying pile on the floor. The Christmas tree lights blinked overhead, ornaments swaying from the commotion, and Caleb thought about how far they'd come. From strangers forced together by well-meaning friends to a family choosing each other intentionally, building something real from the messy, complicated truth of their lives. They got married in March, a small ceremony in Nora's garden with the roses Eleanor had loved blooming around them. Eleanor was there in her wheelchair, lucid enough to smile at her daughter in her simple white dress, to squeeze her hand and whisper, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Mason served as best man, taking his duties so seriously he practiced his part for weeks. He stood beside his father with pride, holding the rings, and when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mason loudly declared, "Nobody better. This is the best thing that's ever happened to us." The gathering laughed, and Nora wiped away tears, and Caleb felt his heart so full it might burst. After the ceremony, they gathered for a simple reception in the garden. Eleanor sat in the spring sunshine, Danny and his wife Sarah beside her, keeping her company and gently reorienting her when she grew confused. Caleb's mother fussed over Mason, making sure he ate something besides cake. And Caleb and Nora stood together, hands intertwined, watching the people they loved celebrate this new beginning. "Thank you," Eleanor said when Nora bent to check on her. The clarity in her eyes was unexpected, precious. "For letting me be here, for letting me see this. I wouldn't have done it without you here, Mom. You're going to be happy. I can see it." Eleanor looked at Caleb. "You'll take care of her?" "Always." "Good. That's all a mother can ask." Eleanor's eyes drifted closed, the moment of clarity fading, but the peace remained on her face. That night, after the guests had left and Eleanor had been returned to the memory care facility, Caleb and Nora and Mason sat in the garden together. Mason had fallen asleep between them, his head on Nora's lap, completely content. "Is this really our life now?" Nora asked softly, her fingers running through Mason's hair. "Apparently so. How does it feel?" "Scary, wonderful, real." She looked at him. "I never thought I'd get this. A partner who stays. A kid who accepts me, a family. You always had family. You just added to it." "We added to each other." Nora leaned over Mason to kiss Caleb. "Thank you for showing up that night, for staying even when it got hard, for loving me through all of it. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with this." They sat in comfortable silence as the evening deepened around them, fireflies beginning their dance in the twilight. Caleb thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a parking lot where he'd almost chickened out, through coffee shop conversations and difficult revelations, hospital visits and memory care transitions, all the way to this moment in a garden at the beginning of their shared life. Mason stirred, mumbling in his sleep, and Nora adjusted to make him more comfortable. The gesture was so natural, so motherly, that Caleb felt emotion catch in his throat. This boy who'd asked so many questions about whether Nora would stay, whether she'd become part of their family, he had his answer now. They all did. In the months that followed, they settled into their new life together. Nora moved into the cabin, bringing her books and plants and the fragments of her old life that mattered. They visited Eleanor together several times a week, bringing flowers and stories, sitting with her even when she didn't recognize them. Some days were harder than others. Some days Eleanor thought Nora was a nurse, or asked about people decades dead, or cried from confusion and fear. But there were also days of unexpected clarity, moments when Eleanor would look at her daughter and smile and say, "You did good, sweetheart. You found your happiness." Mason thrived with Nora in the house. She helped with homework and listened to his endless YouTube facts and taught him to cook simple meals. When he had nightmares, she was there alongside Caleb, offering comfort without trying to replace his mother. She carved out her own space in his life, and Mason loved her for exactly who she was. Not a replacement, but an addition, someone who'd chosen to love him when she didn't have to. Caleb watched his wife and son together and felt gratitude so profound it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. This family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances, from joke-blind dates and honest conversations, it was more than he'd ever imagined possible. One evening in late summer, almost a year after their wedding, they received a call from the memory care facility. Eleanor had passed peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face, holding a photo of Nora from her wedding day. The grief hit Nora hard, even though they'd known it was coming. She cried for the mother she'd lost years ago in stages, for the woman who'd slipped away piece by piece until only fragments remained. But she also cried with relief that her mother's fear was over, that Eleanor had finally found peace. At the funeral, Nora spoke about her mother with love and honesty, about the vibrant woman she'd been, and the grace with which she'd faced an impossible disease. She talked about the gift of time they'd had, the moments of clarity scattered through the confusion, and the importance of letting go with love when holding on meant suffering. "My mother taught me to be strong," Nora said, her voice steady despite her tears. "But my husband taught me that strength includes knowing when to ask for help. Both lessons were necessary. Both were gifts of love." After the service, they gathered at the cabin, friends and family sharing stories of Eleanor, celebrating her life rather than just mourning her death. Mason showed everyone the puzzle box Nora had bought him at the farmer's market, explaining that Mrs. Hayes had helped him solve the last compartment during one of her lucid days. "She said the best puzzles are the ones you solve with people you love," Mason told the assembled group, "because even if you forget how you solved it, you remember the feeling of solving it together." Later, when everyone had gone and Mason was asleep, Caleb and Nora sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Nora leaned against him, exhausted but peaceful. "She would have liked today," Nora said. "The stories, the laughter. She always said funerals should celebrate life, not just mourn death. You honored her well. I couldn't have done any of this without you. The facility, the last year, today, you were there for all of it." Nora turned to look at him. "I keep waiting for it to be too much, for you to decide this wasn't what you signed up for. But you just keep showing up. That's what love is, Nora. Showing up, staying, building something together even when it's hard. When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher. A woman who showed me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that asking for help is strength, and that real love grows in the spaces between perfect moments." He kissed her forehead. "She also happened to be set up with me as a joke. Best joke anyone ever played on me." Nora laughed through her tears. "Your friends must be feeling pretty smug about how well their prank turned out." "Danny brings it up constantly, says he's responsible for our entire relationship and deserves credit at family gatherings. He's not entirely wrong." "Don't tell him that. His ego can't handle it." They sat together as the night deepened, comfortable in the silence, comfortable with each other. Caleb thought about the journey that had brought them here. All the fear and hesitation, the risks taken and the trust built, the way they'd woven their separate lives into something shared and strong. Inside the house, they could hear Mason talking in his sleep, something about building a treehouse. Their son, because that's what he'd become to Nora. Not through biology, but through choice, through daily acts of love and commitment. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked. "That I almost didn't show up that night. To our first date. I was sitting in my truck trying to convince myself to just drive away. What stopped you?" "Fear of missing something important. Turns out I was right to be scared." Caleb pulled her closer. "If I'd driven away, I would have missed this. You, us, everything. I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Nora made a wish silently. Caleb didn't ask what she wished for. He didn't need to. They had everything they needed right here. A home built on honesty, a family forged from choice, and a love that had grown strong enough to weather loss and change and all the complications life could throw at them. This was what second chances looked like. Not perfect, not without pain, but real and lasting and worth every moment of fear it had taken to get here. Inside, Mason called out in his sleep, "Dad? Nora?" They went to him together, standing in the doorway of his room, watching their son settle back into dreams. Nora's hand found Caleb's in the darkness, and he squeezed it gently. "Ready for bed?" she whispered. Yeah, let's go home. We are home. And she was right. They were home. Not because of the place, but because of the people in it. Because of the love they'd chosen to build together. Because of the promise they made every day to show up, to stay, to be present through whatever came next. Caleb Turner had walked into a cafe expecting humiliation and found hope instead. He'd risked his carefully protected heart and discovered that the best things in life required exactly that kind of courage. And now, standing in the hallway of his cabin with his wife's hand in his, and his son sleeping peacefully nearby, he understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone real, someone worth showing up for, someone who showed up for you in return. And that kind of love, built on honesty and presence and the willingness to face hard things together, that was worth everything. The joke blind date his friends had orchestrated as a prank had given him something he'd stopped believing he could have: a family, a partner, a future full of possibility. And as Caleb followed Nora to their bedroom, closing the door softly behind them, he sent a silent thank you to Danny and Sarah and everyone who'd pushed him out of his comfortable solitude and into the terrifying, beautiful chaos of loving someone again. Sometimes the best things in life started as jokes. Sometimes vulnerability led to connection. Sometimes showing up despite your fear was exactly the right choice. And sometimes a single dad who'd learned to trust silence found something better than quiet. He found a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of noise that came from people choosing each other every single day. That was the real ending. Not perfect, but honest. Not easy, but worth it. And in Caleb's mind, that made it the best kind of story, the kind that was true.